No, you're 34% of a tax bill.
Of the tax bill.
So for every dollar that you actually collect, you keep 34
Right,
cents.
okay. So my question is, as you, like, you represent other towns and stuff, are we in the ballpark of where we should be as a municipality? Because I mean, I see a million people and everybody's always filling my head with things. Some people are telling me other towns are running at 40%. Other people are telling me other towns are running at 18% in the municipality. I mean, is there a gauge of, or an average of where we should be with that?
I don't know that I want to totally put something on the
Yeah.
record, but I think you're in the middle.
Right.
You know, at 35%, I want to say you threw out some numbers, but I want to say it's probably closer to somewhere between 30 and 40 on average, maybe some in the high 20s. But, you know, a lot of that has to do with equalized value when you get to the county level, what
Right.
share, et cetera. So that can be a little bit misleading. I would want you to be more concerned with, are you meeting the needs of your public, right? More than, you're not out of the relevant range,
Yep.
certainly, and it's hard to make a big generalization, though, you know, because you're at 34%, you're, you know, 1% better than the average of 35. There's so many different factors on assessed value and equalized value when it gets to the county level, and the type of school system that you run, and how much state aid your school system gets, right? So.
That's what I was
doesn't
saying.
get.
Right.
So the
Right. So you always want to make sure when people bring that up, right, because I've heard that say more,
Yeah.
you're comparing apples and apples. If you have a municipality that has a sewer utility, it's not the same, right, because our sewer costs are included in our budget. You know, if the schools are spending a lot more money than our school district, you're going to be a lower percentage.
Right.
Right, so anytime you're dealing with percentages, I think it's,
Yes.
you gotta make sure.
Up to 10,000.
Yeah.
State aid is a huge factor,
Right.
right? So there are other communities, certainly in Essex County, that get a lot more municipal state aid, and there are some communities who get a lot more school state aid than Nutley does. Nutley is not in a desirable position of, in fact, I would say you're in the undesirable position of probably relative to other communities in the area getting less state aid than some of the surrounding
And Ray-
municipal state aid.
Ray, you know, my thought is also that when you maintain those services that the people need, your property values are up. You want a township that people are desiring to come to, not flee. So that's why I talk about that balance, and when you know, bring up that we have to meet the needs of the people, I think we are. I think we all know, we've been here for many, many years, this town is famous for really meeting the needs of the people, above and beyond that a lot of people aren't aware of, above and beyond.
So, you know, if you take what Ray said, if you boil it down to something simple, if Nutley gets, when you consider our municipal aid, our school aid, and the state aid that goes, that supports the county, you put all that together, that's about $19 million worth of aid, which basically covers about 18% of our tax levy, which means 82% of our tax levy has to be absorbed locally by our local taxpayers. So it forces us to actually look, to your point is, to actually look very carefully around where we're spending money, how we're spending money. It's why we have a capital program that only allows us to do certain amounts each year, and we spread out major purchases to help manage our way through that. And so, when you think about that, 82% of the tax levy is actually absorbed by 80% of the taxpayer base, which is residential. Is a residential taxpayer, and of that group, 15% are senior citizens. So if we, and I know, and I'm saying this because I know you all know this, and when we sit down and we actually talk about what we have to spend money on and why we're going to spend it, we never lose sight of what that responsibility is. I have been arguing that with the state for years, but most recently, given the variables with Hoffman LaRoche and the fact that there was a sort of a belief that with Hoffman LaRoche being here, they were the benevolent benefactor, which gave us a lot of support, which we all know that hasn't been true for many, many years. That sharing that with the state, saying, you know, when you look at these aid formulas and this aid allocation, especially when you look at our neighbors, it begs the question, why, right? And simple questions that I raised, like the most recent one was the additional allocations for school aid. Nutley got $154,000 in the fall for school aid when the state looked at the formula. Yet our neighbors got, you know, in one case over $1 million, in another case almost $2 million, right? And I'm saying, and you're saying, why, right? Whatever's going on with this formula, it doesn't make sense.
It's almost like you're being punished for being fiscally responsible, going all the way back, not just with this Board of Commissioners.
Exactly.
But with commissioners probably going back 20, 30 years.
Absolutely.
So there needs to be a change.
Absolutely. And when you look at the median income of the surrounding towns, it's not that different, right? Square miles, not that different. Population, you know, is not that different. We're a little bit smaller than our neighbors, so we're about 29,000. Bell was about 35 in that range, right?
Around there.
But we're not. But it's not, you know, significant.
Hundreds of thousands.
Right, yeah, exactly. But when you look at, you know, for example, to your point, Steve, protecting our town, we do not have the ability to invest in public safety, right, the way our neighbors can, because it's not affordable. Yet, you know, and you look at all of our departments, we push everybody to the maximum limit to make sure that we're getting, you know, everything we can. You know, and the old saying, a fair day's wage for a fair day's work. We make sure that there's a fair day's work there because we have to. We have to. We have uncertainties that exist that you know, we have to be careful about as we look at the transition of Roche. But I think right now, to your point, you know, earlier, if we didn't get the state aid and they didn't hear us in 2014 and start giving us that money, right, losing $5.7 million worth of revenue from Roche, if we didn't have the state aid offset, right, while we've been able to manage, you know, our municipal levy, you know, to below, for most years, to well below 2%, right? Imagine what it would have been if we didn't get that aid to absorb it. Because to your point is that question, I'm not sure we would be able to find enough reductions, right? If we had to say, find a way to absorb $5.7 million.